Do you ever wonder why these game studios just don't publish the games themselves? Well, the answer is simple.
Money!
And Naughty Dog founder explains why he sold the studio to Sony, saying that looking back on it, it was the right call. And the reason why it was a good call?
Money!
So we're going to dive into what Naughty Dog co-founder Andrew Gavin said about selling the studio to Sony, the rising cost of game development, and a Bond villain quality discussion Activision had with Bungie when finalizing the deal with Destiny. Like, it's chilling how evil it sounds. If you guys enjoyed the video, like, subscribe is always appreciated, but let's get right into those details. So on a recent post here on LinkedIn, Andrew Gavin just kind of went out and just kind of stated like the facts about why these game studios need these publishers to be able to make these quality games that people want to enjoy. Basically citing the skyrocketing budget that it takes to make these type of games, saying how like in the 80s it only cost $50,000, then like in the 90s it was about like 100,000, then like late 90s you're getting into the millions, and then once you get into 2004 we're talking 40 to 50 million dollars, and then nowadays like 40 to 50 million dollars for a single game, like that's a steal. And with Naughty Dog's last large title releasing costing up to $220 million, and that's actually pretty standard now for this type of game. I always find this kind of information just fascinating because it's a peek behind the curtain of how this whole game industry really works. Because as a user on our end, we just get to play the games and sometimes they're released in not great state, and we're like, why can't you make games like you did back in the early 2000s when they're just complete products and fun and everything just worked? Well, this post I think gives you a little bit of details what we're talking about here. Gavin states by 2004 the cost of AAA games like Jack 3 had soared to 45 to 50 million, and they have been rising ever since. Back in the 2000s we were still self-funding every project, and the stress of financing these ballooning budgets independently was enormous. It wasn't just us, this was and still is a systematic issue in the AAA space. Developers almost never have the resources to fund their own games, which gives publishers enormous leverage. Selling to Sony wasn't just about securing a financial future for Naughty Dog, it was about giving the studio the resources to keep making the best games possible without being crushed by the weight of skyrocketing costs and the paralyzing fear that one slip would ruin it all. Looking back, it was the right call. AAA games have only gotten more expensive ever since. Today's big budget games can easily cost 300, 400, or even 500 million to develop. Would we have been able to keep up? Maybe, but selling to a right party gave Naughty Dog the stability it needed to thrive and to continue making these kinds of games we'd always dreamed of. I think we already kind of knew this, that working with publishers such as like Activision, Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, that these are just kind of necessary evils almost that game studios need to do to be able to make the games that they want to make. And I think this also kind of comes along with like the idea of power creep, which we all know from video games, especially in games like Destiny 2. If you guys have played that game for more than 5 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or even like with World of Warcraft, where like you constantly need to keep one-upping yourself when it comes to game development, because if you just kind of release the same game but just with a new story, maybe some new mechanics here and there, but essentially the same thing, people would be upset like, why didn't you just make an advancement to your next game? Like, come on, we've seen this power creep continue on because technology is deeply tied to game development. Showing how more technically advanced this new game is compared to your last game or any other games out there is a major selling point for a lot of developers out there. But making your game bigger and better also means bigger and higher costs. When I was looking at the list of most expensive video games ever developed, I definitely started to notice a trend. Genshin Impact at 2020, Star Citizen, which hasn't even been released yet, is insanely expensive to make. Monopoly Go, which is insane to see that up there, but of course they've hired like the most popular actors right now to be a part of their marketing, so that's all the numbers are really can judge. Cyberpunk 2020, and then it had the 2023 update right there when it comes to Phantom Liberty. Spider-Man 3, which is not even released yet, it's already predicted to be at $385 million. Original Modern Warfare 2 back in 2009, but this is Call of Duty, like it was going to print money. They had Spider-Man 2. How about The Last of Us, like we talked about earlier, 2020. Then we had Horizon Forbidden West, 2022. Spider-Man Miles Morales, 2020. Only games that are really breaking that trend are one, like I said, Call of Duty, and then you also had Final Fantasy VII, but that was like one of the greatest Final Fantasies of all time, and this game was proven to print money at that time as well. They had Halo 2, which again, one of the biggest console games ever made was going to be a success guaranteed. Destiny was up there as well, but I think this was kind of starting the trend of rising costs. Like even Callisto Protocol is up here, and this game did not really succeed at much at all. So having the backing of these major publishers who just have oogles amount of money, that they kind of need them to be able to make the kind of games that they want to make, to have their product to be recognized by the public, so then they can be make a game that they really want to enjoy. But of course, those publishers want to get their money back, and this conversation with Activision and Bungie back when they were signing the deal for Destiny 1 really gives you just like Bond villain vibes when hearing about it. And this is what they had to say. Where ex-Bungie executive says Activision deal was bad from the start, with Destiny nearly went to Microsoft. This Bungie exec being Marty O'Donnell, the guy who's in charge of all the audio and music that came with the original Destiny and all the Halo games. In an interview with our good old boy Hidden Xperia, talks about the experience about working with Activision, and it's just like chilling, honestly. Like, it's kind of scary. Saying during the dinner that the Bungie and Activision had with their execs, saying O'Donnell says that he was talking to the Activision CFO about saying be nice to the goose, with Bungie being the goose laying the golden eggs for Activision, being like, hey, just let us do our thing. We know what we're doing. We've made great stuff before, like Halo. Have you heard of it? And so just let us do our thing, and you'll enjoy it, right? Well, Activision exec said something a little, just again, like just chilling. And according to O'Donnell, the CFO told him that he liked the analogy, but sometimes there's nothing like a good frog wah, which is the controversial food made by force feeding the goose before slaughter. Like, oh my God. So it really does depend on who you sign up with when it comes to being a studio trying to get that funding so you can make the kind of games you want to make, right? If you're signing up with Activision or EA, you know what you're getting yourself into. If you're signing with Microsoft, there might be a little meddling here or there, but they seem to be rather hands-off with their teams, so just kind of support them where they need them to be, but also try to help them be financially viable as possible. And Ubisoft's trying to squeeze out as much money as they can from their titles. Don't forget to buy the wild card. Also, you can buy the game. Also, you can buy over here. Don't forget to subscribe to Ubisoft Plus. Don't forget there's a standard edition, but don't you want the gold edition? What about the ultimate edition with all the little goodies? And that's for a single player game. Like, come on. Now, the gaming industry is still relatively new compared to other industries, especially like the movie industry, where you can kind of take a note from where to invest your money in, where we're not seeing that same type of proper investment when it comes to games. We look on here for the most expensive game movies ever made. These are unadjusted for inflation, so these are just recent costs essentially. You can definitely start noticing a trend. You have Star Wars, Jurassic World, Star Wars again, Fast and the Furious, Pirates of the Caribbean. You have more of a Marvel, Avatar, which is the sequel to the first one, Marvel, Indiana Jones, Avengers, The Marvels, Pirates of the Caribbean. You actually had the Justice League, which, I mean, that was, I guess, kind of meh right there. Star Wars again. You had Mission Impossible. This is one of the later sequels to the thing as well. Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Harry Potter, Fast and the Furious, Lion King, Marvel, James Bond, The Little Mermaid, Avatar again. How about more Star Wars? How about Dark Knight Rises? How about some more Marvel, some more Pirates of the Caribbean? I think you get my point that like they're investing their money and time into these guaranteed IPs that are just going to print money, compared to some other game IPs out there spending $400 million on a brand new IP that no one knows about and making a 5v5 hero shooter. You're kind of just setting yourself up for failure and a huge loss. And remember when I was talking about power creep and how games have just been exponentially just getting more and more expansive and more technically advanced? That's what's causing this rise of the budgets to happen. But think about like the games back in the early 2000s, right? That they weren't just like these be-all, end-all type of games. Think of a game like the Mass Effect trilogy, right? Where it says, here on, was it the How Long to Beat? It's a rather credible website to give you a rough estimate how long it takes to complete a game. Mass Effect 1, main story, 17 hours. Main story and extras, about 30 hours. Mass Effect 2, about 35 hours. Mass Effect 3, about the same. But then we go to like Mass Effect Andromeda over here, and you'll see that it is about a little over around 60 hours to complete one main playthrough of Andromeda. How about another classic people love, Fallout 3, main story about 22 hours, main story and extra, which with Bethesda games, like, that's a lot of little extra things that maybe you don't really need to bother to do. But even then, still 50 hours to complete. Compare that to modern day games, the biggest culprit being Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where a main story playthrough is 61 hours, and main story and extra will cost you right around 100 hours. Cyberpunk Ultimate Edition can cost you up to 80 hours. Elden Ring taking about 60 to 100 hours to complete. Like, I'm just trying to point out that games back in the early 2000s weren't really designed to be like that long of a game. That's kind of insane to put that much time into a singular game. But that's starting to be the standard, like 100-hour long RPG games. And this is where I'm talking about that power creep, where like you have so much bigger worlds, you have so many more things to do within the game that you need to keep trying to one-up yourself to make sure that like the next game is the next cool big thing and the next big advancement, so everyone starts talking about your game. And honestly, I just kind of wish games were a little bit shorter nowadays. Like, remember when Assassin's Creed Mirage was being promoted and people were finding out that like, oh my god, thank god it's not a 100-hour long game. So like you can beat the game in 20 or 30 hours. It's 5 times shorter than Valhalla, and people were being thankful that it's actually a much more shorter, condensed experience, especially for how many great games are out there that like, I want to play more of these games, but I can't invest like 200 hours into a singular game. So I would just like to see more compact, focused experiences moving forward. Maybe that could help lower the cost a little bit, just be a little bit more focused when it comes to what your game is meant to be. I think we're at the point now in gaming where you're trying to make the determination between like time spent to the game versus money spent on the game itself, or how much it costs and what that ratio is for you. Because still, even with gaming being like $70 a game, that playing through a 20-30 hour game, that's a much more effective way to get entertainment for your buck, bang for your buck, compared to like going out to the movies or going out for dinner even. I just feel right now we're at a breaking point when it comes to game development, and we'll just need to see what the future holds for us and how these executives are going to bounce back so they can still afford their 4th or 5th summer home. Maybe guys, if you guys enjoyed this type of videos, make sure to like, maybe even to subscribe if you guys liked it that much. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.